welcome back to the channel. My next build is going to be a Revell Monogram 1/5/78 scale Titanic. This was graciously given to me by a good friend of mine called Joe. I'm not sure if he wants me to use his last name, but thank you, Joe. Ever since he did give it to me, I've been itching to build this one. The box is in a little rough shape, but I opened it up and I gave a little preview before filming this to see if all the parts were there. It looks like they are, and there's a small decal sheet, so I think we're good to go on this one. Before I start this, I want to thank AlexModeling, which is another YouTube channel where Alex from Portugal actually built this, and he also documented all the rough patches, the things that are problematic with the kit. So I'm going to be doing the same. We'll see if I run into the same issues or not. One thing I want to do with this kit as an addition, a mod if you want to call it that, is to add lights to the ship. Basically, once this is all built in, painting it all black interior, and drilling all the holes for the portholes and a few lights for the cabins and rooms and things like that, so that if I have it displayed, I could have it in a kind of a nighttime display, dark with some a lit background. It's a big kit. It's a 447 centimeters, which is I took out the big ruler. It's about 18.5 inches long, so quite a big one, which was an issue for me because I was also considering building a diorama where basically I would have this built as a full ship, determining where the water line is, and then having it inset into an ocean, a seabed, with an iceberg here, and then creating a fake water, a surface, and started looking at a whole bunch of videos for that, which looks really interesting. I was just a little bit concerned about the size and what kind of a diorama I get out of it, and also what to use, how to get a contour line. I know that there's contour gauges for that, but if I can get the appropriate material that's strong enough to hold this thing and be lightweight, and that I could easily go cut out, number one. Like plexiglass is hard to cut, so that's probably out. Obviously glass is out, but those are the kinds of issues I have to do a little more investigation before I go the diorama route. But it's certainly a possibility. I'll have to see if I make a diorama or not. But basically, build the ship first with the lights, and then take it from there. So we'll see how it goes. Okay, another update over here. I've made some progress on it. The first thing I need to say is that I ran into two issues with the kit. The first one was easy kind of to fix. As you can see, I've done some work on the hull over here. The biggest problem on the hull is that when you line up the pins, you'll see that, and the plastic itself, there's one side that is a lot thicker at the bottom of the hull, the plastic, than the other side. So this was very uneven when you have the pins correctly inserted. Luckily, it's a quick fix with putty and a bit of sanding. I've got one more round of putting to go, but most of it's already gone, so that was the easy fix. The biggest problem with the kit, which is kind of a major one, is the number of scratches on the plastic. You can't see it here, but basically it's almost every piece that has deck has scratches. There's scratches here, over here, there's scratches over here. They're everywhere, and that's not an easy fix. You really can't sand these out. It's hard to get into those locations, number one, because of the protuberances. Anyhow, it's hard to get to. You can't really sand them out. I did try a bit here and there. They'll have to be there with the kit. I'm hoping the painting itself will mask some of it, but not all. Obviously, there's not going to be any way to do any washes afterwards to bring out the deck planks or anything like that, because it would bring out the scratches more than anything else. So it is what it is. We'll live with it. I did drill out a lot of the portholes. The ones near the top, which are the bigger holes, which are 1 millimeter, I did about like 50% of them. And then as I got lower and lower, I did like maybe 70, 1 out of 7 holes. Both sides over here, you can see kind of what it looks like. I don't know if you get that focuses in. But anyhow, again, this is for that later on when I had lights put in. One of the things I wanted to do with those lights is also have some beaming through the top wherever there were. There's a giant staircase in the ship, and I thought you could light it up from the bottom to say that this would be lit up. So for that, I looked at 2 reference materials to figure out exactly where they were, because I wasn't sure if it was here, 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 or even there. Watch the movie Titanic. Get rid of it. Useless. Nothing gonna help. But I do have this Titanic book that I've had actually for many years, and while most of the pictures in this book are the interiors and stuff like that, there's one nice giant fold out. I can bring it over here. That really was helpful. Here's what I was talking about. This is the main staircase, and this is all glass lit up. But if you look inside, you'll find that it is actually covered by a grid for support. And again, this was really helpful, which is, turns out that that's the one right there. So I'm going to see if I can drill that out. And so when I have the lights, I'll put a little acetate, maybe a dark blue acetate, or maybe even a dark yellow, just so I have some light coming out from the bottom over there, to show what it would look like. One of the few other helpful diagrams was this one over here. So again, you'll see more than one lit area, so I wasn't too sure. But anyhow, great book. This was one of those cheapy bin ones. I don't know how much I paid, $5, $6, whatever. But it's a good reference book if you can get your hands on one. And that's pretty much it for now. We'll see. Oh, I masked off the walls, which I want to keep white. AlexModeling, what he did was the opposite. He actually, for his airbrushing, he actually ended up masking the entire deck, which was painstakingly enough. This, of course, took hours. It's still not finished. You can see some places where the washi tape is coming off, so I'll have to tighten that before I give it, the primer shot and paint the deck itself with deck tan. But this took hours. Drilling the holes took hours, so very slow progress once again, but it's getting there. Okay, so I've done some painting, as you can see now. The deck came out better than I was hoping. As you can see now how the white walls are still, I left them white because they were all masked out. I was worried that it wouldn't get into like some of the nooks and crannies over here, but it seems to have done the job. I'm very happy. I'm beyond pleased how it came out. There's a few areas where there was a little seepage, but I can easily sand those pieces, those places, because more or less it was the top, which I wasn't too worried about. So happy with that. I started painting the hull bottom red over here, Tamiya red, and that looks fine. Basically, there's gonna be a water line that's basically somewhere around the halfway point here and the halfway point there. So I just made sure I painted the area that needed to be red, and with a little overspray there. The rest, now I'm gonna mask this off and paint the black. I noticed also while painting with the Tamiya paint, there's no issue about clogging up these holes where I'm gonna have the lights, hopefully the LEDs, to shine through. So that looks good. I did paint in the inside bottom black. This is just craft paint black because I didn't want to have light other than coming out through the portholes. I didn't want it to seep through this. There is still a little leakage now, but again, once this is painted black, and I will also do the interior black, there should be no issue with that. So a little progress there. Okay, quick update over here. As you can see, let me turn this off for a second. I've finished off the painting of the black by masking off the red and keeping the mask that I had up on top for the white portion. Looks great, really happy with it. Just Tamiya paints. What I've also done is gouged out the part of the ceiling above the ballroom where I want to have a blue LED to show, because under normal circumstances there would be a light source at night over here where you can see that light popping through, and I wanted to use a blue LED for that and white LEDs in the ship itself for that. So I rigged up a quick circuit over here. I won't go through all the electronics. I'll show you the circuit diagram and some of the calculations maybe on it, but basically it's just about high intensity LEDs, one for that portal over here. I'm gonna have an opaque piece of acetate, hopefully a blue one that I can find like from a tab from one of those separators that you put in binders. I thought I had one, I couldn't find it, and I'm hoping that these are enough. I did a quick test with the ship itself when it's fairly dark and you can see the lights. Now, to increase the intensity and make sure that they come out through the portholes, I had a few ideas. Number one, I'm gonna put something like this. I was thinking either foil, like a triangular shape like that, so that it would, the light coming from the bottom will disperse the LED light to each side, and that's why I basically crumble up the foil. Another thing I may use instead of that is this stuff over here. It's reflective tape that you actually use for home duct systems. This stuff is really sticky. It is expensive, but I already have it, and basically I can crumble this up just like the foil over here. I can put some on the bottom, so whatever is bouncing back and forth that hits the bottom will come back off and reflect that. And then again, a strip down the middle over here. It doesn't have to be too much, just enough to bring, basically not have the light get wasted on this part here and get reflected back to the sides. So hopefully this is going to work. Okay, we're at the bench over here. I just want to show a bit what I've done in terms of the lighting. You can see right now there's the LEDs are in. This is just mocked up. All these parts are very loose, very fragile, but I just want to show and test to see if the lighting would work. So we see a lot of bleed through over here and over here with the LEDs coming from the bottom. So what I'm going to have to do is make sure I paint those areas black under so we don't get that lighting. You can see we got a little nice portal over the staircase, and when we cut to the side, all those LEDs are working fine. I might even have to fill up a few of those holes. It goes all the way to the very end here, and it looks like it's a little too much, but we'll have to do another run once the LEDs and everything else is in there solid, and I might have to block a few more holes. Okay, quick update on the Titanic over here. I've started building the a lot of the smaller pieces and started painting some of the detail on the deck. I also went and did some touch-ups for the deck tan for some places where the didn't get into quite some corners, coming out great. I did notice one problem, well, a few actually. One that was mentioned in some of the other videos is that these side ladders, the long ladders, they're really not to scale in terms of the thickness and the width. So I filed these down as much as I could, made them a lot thinner on the side, still left a little of the ridge on the side over here, and as thin as possible, just filing, making them a little bit better. There was one problem I noticed with the ladders that go against the smokestacks. There are 4 of them, but they're not all the same. Even the smokestacks are not all the same, so be careful there. There's a cutting guide over here where you're supposed to cut down the first and the second ladder so that it fits fits into where it hits the deck, and they're different areas, like here's the cut for 1, here's the cut for 2, but the problem is if you use this template, it is not to scale with the actual part. So be careful with that. I think what I'm going to do is, before cutting any of these, is make a line I'll protract that. I'll basically do the transform for the size on that and make my markings before I cut them. Not a big deal, but be careful of that. I've also started working on the diorama base. So I mentioned that I was going to take kind of a sign, that they use for, lawn signs, things like that. And I got one. It's meticulously, work where you have to make that groove. This is not 100% complete, but a few things to be careful of. Number one, there's these protrusions over here for the propellers, but the water line is actually less than those protrusions. So be careful. You're trying to get that red line over here. So when you're building this setup, this has to go in and under into the notches over there. And then what I've just did is going, a bit at a time, a little here, a little there, on the left, on the right, measuring as I go to see where it would fit in. It doesn't have to be perfect because it's going to be, mounted in such a way that there'll be, supports wherever needed. But one thing I did notice that it's a little helpful is that when you're making these signs, when you're cutting the signs, because this is so thick and hard to cut, always cut along the edge over here so that where you're actually working is a lot thinner. It makes it a lot easier to work with. So basically every time I notch something out, I went in and scribed this on the other side to make it a lot thinner, just to make it a little bit better and easier. So working along, coming along. Last but not least, if the diorama base works, I will be using this piece of styrofoam, or a small chunk of it, for the iceberg. Now I'm wondering how to cut this, because when if you're just chipping away at this, you end up with the little bubbles that form the actual styrofoam itself, and you don't want that. I've seen people use heat guns and things like that to make smooth surfaces, but that kind of brings out the bubbles itself sometimes. So I don't know. What I'm going to try first is actually light dabs of acetone. Acetone eats this stuff up. So I'm going to, try with one sample first, see how it goes, get the rough shape of the iceberg that I want, and then maybe a combination of heat gun and acetone, see if I can just get a little smoother surface so that it looks like a real iceberg. Oh, that's it for now. Okay, it's been about 2 weeks since I've done an update over here. A lot of progress has been made, little few moments here and there. It's taking longer than usual, which is my norm. You can see I've got most of the decks all laid out with all the little fiddly bits and things like that. I've got 3 layers already glued. I've wired in most of the electronics, other than the one that has the light over the ballroom. Obviously that's going to go in last, but it's all pre-tested. Everything works so far. I've done a lot of painting with other pieces not shown, not already on there, coming out fine. There's I think maybe 2-3 pieces really that need to be painted, other than the base itself. Everything's coming fine. I've ended up doing some panel line accents. I had a lot of problems with my Jenny not working, but it worked fine here. I nearly had a problem taking it off because I forgot to use mineral spirits to wipe it, but after I did that, everything came out okay. I've thinned out the ladders. I'm not sure if I mentioned it before, because they're really out of scale. And what I've done is gotten using dry brushing to get the steps to show. It's only on one side. The other side will be white, but at least you do see some steps. I think I'm going to do one more round of dry brushing on that. I've done little additions, like boring out the holes in the funnels that are all over this ship. Really, there's well over a dozen of them, and I bored them out, meticulously. They're not that detailed to begin with, but I did what I could with that. Another addition I did is I had a lot of very fine 100 micron mesh that I have for another hobby of mine. And what I decided to do is that there's these giant vents all over the place, and basically I put a little mesh in front, so if you get really really close you can see that detail uh, in there. It looks better than it would just, a flat surface. One thing I need to mention is you do need some clamps that are at least the width of the ship, because these are really tricky to get into place. They eventually they do settle into their marking spots and things like that, but it's really really tricky, and there's like gaps along the way. So as you're doing it, you really need some clamps to tighten down the side so that they get glued as you go with that. I've started working on the base too. I've cut framing around for the base itself. I started working on the iceberg. This is still drying over here. It's a lot of work to be done. Trying to get a smooth surface on this. There's a lot of we talked about this before. A combination of heat gun, acetone, PVA glue, and right now I've got some wood filler in there that's just about to dry off, but it does need more work, more PVA glue, or I'll try maybe something else even above that. But at least it's the shape, more or less what I wanted. I've put it to scale on the base to see, if it was more or less the right dimensions, and everything looks good. So a lot of work to be done, but really the hard part's already done. And it's looking good. So maybe one more video after this to capture the final build. Okay, so I did a lot of work on the base over here. I can barely get my camera high enough to show the whole thing, but basically it's a basic wood frame that I used with some scrap wood I had, with the corner posts that will hold this. It'll be recessed by about a 1/4 inch or so. Still have to trim this a bit, and there'll be other supports in here at the same height, so that there's extra support all along the way over here. No problem with it dropping in. I did a lot of work on the iceberg, and it came out really really good. Still not finished, a lot of work to be done on it. Basically the solution to give fill in most of the recesses and kind of give it that drippy look was some old Wellbond PVA glue, 3 coats or so, and it was nice and thick, which allowed it to again get a smooth surface and the drip effect. This is not finished now. I did look at a lot of reference photos online for what real icebergs look like, and there's all lots of variances, but a lot of them have this kind of a blue sheen. Now it's not necessarily that the icebergs are blue, it's more reflection off the water, off sunlight and things like that, so they'll have a little more blue towards the base. And because this diorama is going to be both used for night scenes or in daylight, I'm gonna try to give it some of that sheen with some clear blue and maybe a little clear green. Very little though, just a light touch here and there, cloudy effect more along the base, and then of course a lot of gloss, clear, to give it the icy look. So it's getting there. And now back to the ship. Okay, so the ship itself, I have all the tiers in now. I was surprised at how hard even those last 2 tiers were to get into place, even though they have specific points of to be set with little nubs and alignment pins and things like that. It was very very tricky. One of the problems I had was these cranes over here, where the instructions just say that have them splayed out open at an angle, but they don't specify that angle. And in the case of these 2 in particular, I had them like at a 45-degree angle, and you can see right now that it would not fit. I basically had to remove them and then glue them back in later, because this is any more than this, and it's already touching that corner over there. So I would suggest you do that later. And not running into the issues I had. Other than that, again, it was very fiddly. It took a long time. Needed those clamps again to get them in, but I'm there now. One thing I had with the problem with the last deck was fitting in those funnels. Like I mentioned, there were lots of funnels, two different types, and I have one extra from one type, and I'm short on one of the other types. Now it's not a big deal. I can make them or just take the one that isn't the exact shape, putting in the other place. But I'm surprised because they do have their own patterns on the bottom, so you can't get them mixed up when inserting them. One's a T, one's a D. That's actually the vents, and one's kind of like an L. So there's no mistaking where they go. And yet I was short on one and have an extra for one of the other ones. But aside from that, everything's fine. After the next step again would be to put the big funnels and the ladders and the masts and things like that. So still some work to do. One thing I should recommend for reference, I mentioned how Titanic was basically useless in terms of reference, is to watch an older movie, A Night to Remember from 1958, which was surprising how much detail they got right when they were doing that. If you know a little bit about the Titanic, the smokestacks, there are four of them, but the aft one here is actually, some people call it a fake smokestack. It's not really a fake smokestack. It's just that it doesn't go to the boiler. So you'll never see the heavy smoke coming out of that one, because all this is really venting is like kitchen gases and things like that. So basically the smoke comes out of the first three, and in the movie they get that right. And you'll see some particularly accurate scenes from this, kind of a raised platform in the back over here. Here it's all solid, but the real Titanic, it was fine, thin railing, if you want to call it that. And in the movie, you'll see lots of scenes with that, so it's unmistakable. So again, you're not going to change it for this, but if you're an ambitious modeler would maybe want to say, I don't want to use this over here. I'll build my own with photo etch or something like thin wiring. But anyhow, it was a good movie. I've seen it a few times. I actually read the book many years ago. So anyhow, that's it for now. We'll see you soon. Okay, let's talk about the electrical contacts. So the ship itself has two contacts that protrude on the exterior, on the base of the hull, positive and a negative, that will get its supply from an exterior source, whether it be the base of the diorama or some other base pedestal or something like that came with the model kit. So what I did there is I also put a separate switch in case it wasn't on the base. My base will have a switch of its own, so in that situation I'll just leave this switch on, which is the green position there, and it will get the electricity from the base. So the base itself, what I did was I built a floating contact platform, if you want to call it that. And what I did was I have two copper-clad metal sheets that are used for the contact points that are glued onto that wood base, and then that wood base was glued onto pieces of sponge, basically. And the idea there is it's flexible enough so that it will be a little higher than it should be, and when the ship is placed on it, it pushes down, and it's got some leeway to forward and aft to make sure that the contacts both hit the positive and the negative. And what I did there is I had to measure as best as I could what that depth was, and then build that platform a little higher, and I basically marked off the section of the base where the ship would be by basically eyeing it more or less where it was, and then trying out a few positions before gluing it all into place. Seems to work fine, and that's it. Okay, I didn't take any pictures of when I was doing the ocean surface. Basically, there's a lot of videos out there, one in particular by Marklinofsweden, where he uses toilet paper and glue to make realistic ocean water. I'll put the link into the notes for the video. And basically what it is you put little strips of toilet paper layered and PVA glue and you build it up. And what I ended up doing is pretty much what he did in his video, where I did 3 layers and then let it dry before I went on to the painting. And for the painting itself, I took pictures, or some pictures as I went along, but very similar to Marklin's video, although my color scheme, because I was in the middle of the ocean, is different from his, where he does a shoreline, but it worked out great. Future on the base over here, the ocean. What I did was I started off with a few splotches of black here and there, and then I went on to a navy blue and tried to blend in some of that black right away, and then tried to cover the whole area with navy blue. Now you'll see that there's a lot of little bits and pieces that are white, and that's okay, because you know the ocean has little waves and rivulets and things like that, and so you leave a bit of them, but don't leave too much. And after the navy blue dried, I went in with some a little lighter Copenhagen blue, and again, you don't put it everywhere, you put it in certain places just to mix it around a bit. And finally I took some the other ones were all decor art paints, and then I finally went with some turquoise over here, and again little splotches here and there, not too much, not all over the place. And did that, and then I went back and did a touch up with more navy blue, just to get the areas where it was too light, and you know, where it needed, or maybe too much black or too much turquoise, and went back in and did another coat of that. Now, as you see, as I'm putting in the future, this is the first layer. I'm probably going to put more to build it up. There's a lot of little, you know, white bubbles and things like that, but don't worry about the future. They'll settle, or at least they should settle as it dries. So I'll let you go with that. Okay, the first layer of the future has been applied. It's already drying. Those little bubbles, they'll just disappear on their own. One thing I forgot to mention is as I was doing the ocean and laying down the paper with the glue, I did look at some wave patterns beforehand to see what kind of wave patterns you would get from the ship. Obviously, there would be a little more whitewash from the engines, the motor turning, and you'll get a little streak at the front and sometimes along the side. So I did blend in kind of like a little ridge along these 4 patterns, 2 in the front, 2 in the side over here. You can't really see it too much, but I didn't want them to be too sharp. And what I did also is, after I did the painting with the blacks, the blues, and the turquoise, I did go over with a little dry brush with white, just to make them stand out a bit. They're very, very, you know, they're not very sharp, they're not very clear, but again, they're supposed to be just small waves coming off the edge there. So, so far, so good. Okay, so the last major part to be worked on was the rigging, and I decided to, you know, follow the rigging for the instructions, which was, you know, quite intricate to begin with. A lot of people don't do any rigging at all, or they just do simple rigging. But what it is basically 4 lines between the 2 masts, and then each one of those lines has a drop-down line that goes to the deck. I mean, there are many more rigging lines on the ship if you look at pictures and references, but even that, it was pretty tough. And then you have, you know, the end supports that go down to the deck, holding the mast upright. And I added 1 extra line there just to keep things straight. So it's very intricate work. You have to keep the shape and the measurements correct as you're basically building it slowly, piece by piece, by stretching them out, and then having CA glue applied to the nodes as you build them out. So it was a lot of time, but in the end, I'm quite happy with the results. And so I'm calling this one done. Here's a bunch of photos you can see for the ship. I tried to take some pictures in the the dark setting with the LEDs and some just in daylight, and it's very hard using my camera to get a picture of the the dark when the LEDs are on. Trust me, it looks a lot better up live. The problem is that the cameras, they try to compensate for the darkness, and they try applying filters, or trying to brighten what is supposed to be dark, and things like that. So the pictures are here, but it looks a lot better alive. You can see that there's a separate switch on the board itself, the main board, and I can turn that off and on while leaving the transformer plugged in, and have it displayed day or night the same way. So I'm very happy with it. It was a lot more work than I thought, which is always the case with me, it seems, but well worth it, and a really nice model in the end. As promised, here's like diagrams for the circuitry that is both on the ship itself, the 5 LEDs, and how it's powered from a source. It's basically Ohm's law across the LEDs, which means you subtract the voltage, the forward bias voltage of the LEDs from whatever source you have, and then from that you have the rest of the voltage goes across the resistors, and you calculate the current that you want, or the maximum current you want, and then what the resistance value is, and then take the next closest standard resistor value in there. So you can see for the whites, I have a slightly smaller resistor because there's going to be less of a voltage drop across that resistor. So I tinkered it, built it out, because every LED is a slightly different when it comes to the voltage, and it worked fine. And then finally, there's the diagram of the wiring that I did in the base itself. Again, I have an LED to show me when the pads under the ship are lit, just in case it's not making contact. So I know that, is at least power getting there, and is it just a matter of contact or not? And another power switch in the front, and then the adapter goes in the rear. So that's it.